thinker and economist. And I also have a fun anecdote here to share, which I think is very interesting, how the path of knowledge, the bridges were built, sort of. So my other co-founder, Francisco Lorraine, who's the chief technology officer of Topsort, he actually was Mike's student while he was at Stanford GSB. And then Al, who just gave this wonderful talk, was the advisor of Michael while he was doing his PhD at Harvard. So very interesting how knowledge is shared throughout time. And thank you guys for being so generous and kind here to share your knowledge and thoughts. Yeah. So Mike has this next talk, the cautionary tale of choice between screen auctions. Yes, I'll let you do the rest.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Everything? All right. So thanks for having me. And it's both scary and a privilege at the same time to go after Al. Because, scary because you've seen how good he is in presenting and being fascinating and funny and wonderful. So it can only be let down after that. On the other hand, as Regina said, it's a real privilege because Al was my advisor for 5 years in graduate school. And I owe him a great debt in terms of becoming a marketplace designer and learning about matching. And on some level, Topsort can trace its intellectual roots to Al and his mentorship. So thank you. What I want to talk about today, I was thinking about several different topics, and I figured that Al gave this wonderful talk on designing all kinds of different markets, and I wanted to zero in on one of them and sort of offer a bit of a cautionary tale that markets are wonderful and they can do all kinds of interesting things, but you need to be really careful when you're designing them. And so it's pretty easy to make mistakes even when things look really simple and the design issue at hand looks very straightforward, and even when big organizations are involved in designing them. And before I jump into the specific substance of what I'm going to talk about, the specific cautionary tale, I will say that it's going to be about European Commission and Google, who tried this auction that, as I will say, ultimately didn't work out. And I don't view it as a criticism of those organizations, because every time you try to do something new, as most of us know, it's hard to get it right on the first try. So in fact, I'm giving them huge props for trying something new in a very sort of hairy and complicated environment. And it's sort of jumping a bit ahead. It didn't work out this time, but hopefully this will be an inspiration for further iterations, and ultimately this thing's working out. All right, so with that intro, let me tell you this cautionary tale. So the specific setting to which this tale applies is a fairly common situation in competition among and between various big tech players in all kinds of subsetting. And specifically, you can think about all kinds of situations where you have a platform. Think about it, Apple iOS or Microsoft Windows or Google Android or any other type of platform you can think about. And then on top of this platform, there are some apps or programs that are competing with each other. This is not going to be about this, but just to give you one very kind of small example, think about the weather app on the Apple iOS, right? There is an Apple weather app, and then there are all kinds of other weather apps, and they're competing with each other. Now, what makes this situation tricky is that regulators and customers may worry that in this type of incredibly common situation, the platform may advantage product A over product B, even if on their own merits, product B would in fact win against product A. And of course, one of the classical cases, and I realize now that there are some people in the room who were probably not born back then, but most of you probably at least are aware of this one. There was this major antitrust case against Microsoft that bundled Internet Explorer and started giving it away for free to compete against Netscape. Okay, it was a huge deal in the late 1990s. I'll have more to say about this in a few slides. And at the time, the solutions that were proposed, and even right now in antitrust cases, the kind of solutions that are proposed are breaking up the company, right? They were literally talking about breaking up Microsoft, which is of course an incredibly heavy-handed solution, right? And it's kind of almost existential for the company, so they're going to fight it tooth and nail. And so it's very hard to impose. Also for the judge, it's really kind of quite an undertaking to order this break up of a major company. And perhaps we may also not want it because there are clearly some benefits from this interoperability. So there is really some need for more fine-grained tools for solving this problem. So to go back to L's medical pictures, basically all we have is a chainsaw for solving this problem, right? To basically cut off product A from platform A, and instead, we would like to have something much more like a scalpel, where you can really do something much more careful. This first elegant solution was proposed and ultimately deployed in that antitrust case against Microsoft, where Microsoft proposed in 1999 during the hearing and said, look, don't break us up. Instead, why don't we introduce this choice screen where users who are installing Windows for the first time will have a choice of different browsers. And if you think we're tying Internet Explorer illegally, they can choose another browser. And in the United States, this proposal was actually not adopted. The judge did not approve it. But about a decade later, when Europe went through a similar process, it was in fact adopted there by the agreement between the European Commission and Microsoft, and it was active for 5 years, from 2010 to 2014. And just to give you a sense of magnitudes, right? These are really big, important decisions. It was accidentally removed on one of the versions of Windows. From May 2011 to July 2012, so for about a year on just one of the many, many versions. And there are good reasons to believe it was in fact accidental. It affected 15 million users who did not see a choice screen, and then Microsoft had to pay penalties of almost 600 million euros for that breach, right? For just that small number of users for just 1 year, right? So they really take it very seriously. It was viewed as a very important remedy. All right, so now this is just choice screens, right? Like the auctions don't come into the picture yet. And this is what this choice screen looked like, right? So this is if you install Windows. As you can see, Internet Explorer was the fourth one, and then there were several other browsers that you could choose. All right, so fast forward a few years. And a very similar tying problem. As I said, this is this picture I showed you in the beginning was blue and green rectangles, very, very common. So a similar high-profile antitrust case was kind of initiated by the European Commission against Google and their tying of search engines and browsers on the Android platform, right? So now Android is the operating system, and then search engines and browsers are the products on top of this. And the European Commission found Google guilty. And there's, it's still appealing. This is a long process, but the initial decision found them guilty and required them to pay $5 billion, which at the time was 4.3 billion euros, for what they found to be illegal tying. And then, as part of the settlement with the European Commission, Google agreed to also display similar style choice screens when a user installs a new version of Android or buys a new phone and starts it for the first time, starting in 2019. Okay? Now, what Google argued was that, look, for Microsoft, Windows was kind of the cash cow, and then they were giving away Internet Explorer for free, so it makes sense to do this choice screen stuff for free. Now, for Google, the economics were flipped, right? The Android was free. Android is a free operating system, but then the search engine is how they were making money. And so they said, look, we're giving away the operating system for free. You're taking away kind of potential our source of revenue. At the very least, we should be able to auction off the right to be on that choice screen and kind of recapture some of the foregone revenue. So these auctions were announced in 2019. They were to be conducted quarterly, starting in March 2020. So then every 3 months, there would be a new auction for the right to be shown on the choice screen. And kind of jumping a little bit ahead, this covered 31 European countries, and in each country there would be a separate auction, right? So because logically, and I'll show you in the data, this is true, like there are some search engines that specialize in some countries, and so it's reasonable that they may win some but not others. So that will give us quite a bit of data to look at all this variety of results. And here is the quote. As I already justified, the auction revenues help Google to continue to invest in developing and maintaining the Android platform. Okay, so far everything seems very logical, and here is what this choice screen looked like. So there would be 4 search engines, and I'll give you a bit more detail in a moment. One of them would be Google, right, which is kind of users still had an option of choosing that. And there will be 3 other options that are the winners of the auction, and the 4 would be displayed in random order. Okay, so it's not quite like ads, where you have position auctions where it's literally kind of in the order of bids. And I'm not sure why they designed it this way. My guess is that if they had a more deterministic order, then Google would need to decide where they're shown on the list, and then if they put themselves in number 1, probably the European Commission would object, and then they wouldn't want to be number 2, 3, or 4. So random order makes all 4 slots sort of interchangeable. All right, so how was this auction designed? And now let me, I know it's a wall of text, so it's a little bit hard to read, but let me sort of read the key parts here and sort of bring your attention to them. So first, from the Q&A on their website. So this is just taken from the screenshot from the Google website. So why does Google use an auction to determine the search providers that appear in the choice screen? And then an auction is a fair and objective method to determine which search providers are included on the choice screen. It allows search providers to decide what value they place on appearing in the choice screen and to bid accordingly. Okay, so that sounds pretty unobjectionable. So now let's read the rules, the actual rules of the auction. So the choice screen auction. Google will use a 4th price auction to select the other general search providers that appear on the choice screen. So okay, why is it? At first it may look strange. Why would you have a 4th price auction? Well, the logic is there are going to be 3 winners, and so the price is going to be determined by the highest loser. Right? Whoever is left out, the highest bidder who is not shown on the screen, that's going to be the price. Right? This way you know that whoever is shown has the highest value, and it is higher than whatever is the person who is left out was willing to pay. It's the same logic, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with second price auctions. When you have 1 slot, second price auction has a lot of nice properties. So here with 3 objects, the 4th price one would have the same feature. So that part is fine. As I already mentioned, the auctions are conducted on a per country basis, and then on a quarterly basis after some initial period. And now in each country, auction search providers will state the price that they're willing to pay each time a user selects them from the choice screen in the given country. So every time a user clicks on the search engine, that's when you pay. So when you pay when you're chosen. And then the 3 highest bidders will appear in the choice screen for that country. The provider that is selected by the user will pay that 4th highest bid. Okay? And then, as I said, the auction winners will be ordered randomly, and then they talk about tie breaking. Okay, so this all sounds like it all makes sense. The 4th price auction may seem odd at first, but it's actually the right thing to do, given that you're selling top 3, three objects, 3 rights to show. So what's the issue here? And in fact, when I first saw it, and when I first saw this announcement, I just kind of thought of, oh, this is a cool example for my teaching. I've never seen 4th price auctions in the wild. It's like, it's just, and I kind of filed it in my memory, and I said, next time I teach, I'll dig it out. So I dug it out about half a year later, and I said, oh, well, let me go see what the results of the auction look like, who actually won. And as I'll show you in a few slides, the results look totally weird. Right? I'm like, okay, this makes no sense. This looks like a well-designed auction, but the results are so strange. And then I started reading this more carefully. And I realized there is a mismatch between what they're saying at the top and what we're saying in the actual auction rules. And it looks like a minor detail, but as I'll argue, that led to kind of the downfall of the entire auction. So what is the little detail? So at the top, they say that search providers will decide how much they value being shown on the screen. Okay, so you're kind of in the ad auction language, is kind of per impression type value, how much you value being shown, being viewed by the users, and are ranked based on that. Now, if you look here, they say, oh, you will bid per user choosing you, so per install, right? Every time when the user actually installs you, so think of it as, per install, then you will pay, and you bid in that language. You bid per install, okay? So at first you may say, well, what's the, why do we, like, why does that make a difference? Ultimately, it's just a statistical translation, right? So you have some, probability of being chosen conditional on being shown, so just multiply one by the other, and it's just a statistical translation. And the problem with that intuition is that this statistical factor is going to be very different for different search engines. So let me give you first a numerical example that will capture kind of the main essence of the problem. And then I'll show you that it's actually true in reality, like this type of issue. So here's an example. Suppose for simplicity that you only have one slot. Well, so you have 2. So one of them is going to be taken by Google, and then there's the other one, only one slot for sale, available to search engines. And there are 2 search engines that are bidding for that slot. Okay? So one of them is search engine X, the other one is search engine Y. Let's look first at search engine X. Suppose search engine X is kind of greedy. Right? They try everything possible to extract revenue out of the users. So there, they figured out how to extract, $20 out of each user. Okay? And that's how much they would be willing to pay per user. Right? Every time someone installs them, they're willing to pay $20. But users are kind of aware of that. They don't really particularly like the search engine. So only 50 users would install this search engine if it was shown to them on the choice screen. Right, and everyone else will just default to Google. Now, suppose there is another search engine, much nicer one, that doesn't try to do everything in their power to extract revenue. Maybe they have some privacy protections. Maybe, like I'll show you an example of a search engine, Ecosia, that actually donates money to plant trees. So their value per user is not as high. It's only $10. Okay? But if you show them to the bidders, to the customers, a lot of them would actually choose that search engine. Okay, so suppose 5,000 would choose them, and if you think that my 2 orders of magnitude difference is an exaggeration, I'll show you it's not. Like that's real. We're literally talking about differences in popularity of those magnitudes. So okay, so this is the example. So let's think about how these 2 different auctions would perform in this case. So first, suppose this auction is on a per install basis, or the way Google auction, the choice screen auction was actually run. Well, search engine X is willing to pay $20 for each install. So they're going to bid $20. Search engine Y is going to bid $10. And search engine X is going to win. Okay? If you're doing it on a per install basis, search engine X is going to win. Now, suppose instead the bidding language was bidding for the right to be shown to the users, right? So let's see. Yeah. So what was here in the top, right? What's the value they place on appearing in the choice screen? Well, then things would be very different, right? Search engine X would have value of $20 times 50, which is $1,000, okay? But search engine Y would have a value of $50,000, right? Because even though their per user value is lower, a lot more users would choose them, and they would be installed. Okay? So that's the basic mechanic. Again, initially seems like a very minor, almost linguistic difference, but it turns out to be very, very substantive. Okay, so what I want to do now, I will very quickly, I'm not going to teach you any math, I'll just show you that it's there. I'll just kind of show some very brief model of how to organize the thoughts about this kind of in the auction theoretic framework. I'll skip all the integrals and all the calculations, and then I'll show you empirical evidence for what actually happened here. All right, so very quickly, how do we think, and what would be a basic auction theoretic model of this? We're going to simplify, assume there's only one slot. Again, there is Google that would be installed by default, that's available by default, and then there is one other slot that's available for auction. We're going to assume there are n search engines that are competing for the right to be shown. And what makes this an interesting setting is that bidders, or the search engines, have two dimensions on which they differ. One of them is, here I put it second, is the value they place on each user, right? How much revenue do they get from each install, from each user who chooses them. But the other one, I'm going to call it here popularity. Kind of in the ad auctions world, we call it quality score, right? So if you are shown on the screen, what's the probability that the user will actually choose you? Okay, and I'm going to denote it as QI. Okay? And for simplicity, I'm just going to assume that both of all these variables are randomly, uniformly distributed between 0 and 1, right? So just assume that they're all random numbers between 0 and 1. That's enough for illustrative purposes. You can make it more complicated, but the logic will remain. And then the auction that's per appearance, right, where you pay for being shown on the screen, would take both of them into account, right? Your value for being shown on the screen is how much you value each user times how many users you expect to get, right? So it's your value per user times the quality score time, R times Q. Now, if on the other hand, we just rank them based on how much they value each user, the per install auction, then you just bid just one of those two variables, just R, how much you value the user, and then the popularity doesn't enter into the picture at all. Make sense? All right. So let's try to think about, in this kind of simple model, what are the outcomes going to be? Like, and how are they going to be different between these two formats? Let's start with, suppose there are just two search engines. Okay? Well, if you run the auction just based on how much they bid per each user, how much the value they have for the user, the other variables, the quality, just doesn't enter into the picture at all. And so if you know that someone won the auction, it tells you absolutely nothing about how good they are, how popular they are. All you know is that they value this user a lot. So the expected kind of popularity, the expected number of clicks they will get, is just the average between 0 and 1, right? It's just 1/2. Now, I'm going to skip the calculations. I'll just show you that they're there. You need to do a bit more math because now you have a product of two random variables. But if you go through all of that math, you find that unsurprisingly, in the auction that takes both of them into account, you end up with higher popularity search engine in expectation winning this auction, right? So the popularity of the winner is going to be higher, which again is not surprising. You have one auction that ranks bidders just based on R and the other one on R times Q, then the latter one will have a higher Q, right? Because it actually does take popularity into account. Now, things get even more dramatic as the number of bidders increases, okay? Why? Because for the per install format that Google actually ran, even as you have more and more bidders, even if you have 1,000 bidders, if you look at the winner, someone who has the highest value, it still tells you absolutely nothing about how popular it is, right? Because it's still just based on this one variable R that's independent of Q. However, if you did it in the way they sort of claim initially they were planning to do, like the per appearance, then with a lot of bidders, if you have, let's say, 1,000 bidders, then whoever wins, to win, you have to have very high scores both on the revenue per user and on the popularity, right? So the divergence between the two results becomes even more dramatic. Now, it gets even worse. And where it gets worse is when you realize that these R and Q are not sort of exogenously given. They're not just kind of given to the search engine. Rather, a more realistic situation is where each search engine has some kind of technological frontier, right? How good your search is, how good your ML models are. So you have some technological frontier. And then you can choose. You can choose to be more greedy, right? Like show more invasive ads, right? So suppose there is a search engine where, in order to use it, you have to watch, a 5-second video, or just like to enter, right? Clearly, that may generate higher revenues, but clearly that makes the search engine less attractive. So or you can go in the other direction and say, oh, we're going to donate to plant trees around the world. We're going to be super privacy preserving, so we're not going to use any user data to target ads. So there is a frontier. And then each search engine picks where on the frontier they are. And again, let's look at the same model. Now, each bidder just has its own technological type that determines this frontier. And then for simplicity, I'm just going to assume that, so if your technological type is 1, then you can allocate some number of that to popularity, and 1 minus that is going to be revenue, right? Think of it as a linear approximation of this technological frontier. Okay? So it's a very, very simple trade-off. Now, in this auction, with this endogenous types, it is still true that the way you bid is the same as before. The only difference is that before making this bidding decision, you need to decide what fraction to allocate to your quality and what fraction to allocate to revenue, right? How greedy to be. Okay? And again, I'm going to skip all the math. If you're interested, the paper is on my website, so you can go read it there. So you go through all of that. And here's what you find. What you find is that if the auction is run on a per appearance basis, right, where you rank advertisers or search engines by a bid per user times how many users you would expect to get by R times Q, then it's actually optimal. You want to maximize the product of two variables as the advertiser, and you want to split your technological type equally, right? So if your technological type is 1, then 1/2 of that is going to go to your popularity, and 1/2 of that is going to go to your revenue per user, right? You're going to balance them equally, popularity and revenue extraction. Now, if you do this on a per install basis, right, where whoever bids more for revenue, you get a very different picture. So with n bidders, you can actually get a closed form solution, which is quite neat. And you allocate TI, so your technological type, over n plus 1 to your popularity. So if you're the only person, if it's not an auction, if it's just like you're just the only one there, they give you the same answers. But if you have more bidders, then you allocate smaller and smaller part to popularity and the rest to revenue, right? So for example, if there are 9 bidders in the auction, then you're only going to allocate 1/10 of your potential to popularity, and 9/10 goes to greed. And so why is that on a per user basis? So why is that? Well, if we're competing on just per install basis, in order to win the auction, I want to make my revenue per install as high as possible, right? Otherwise, I just cannot win in the auction. And so you get this really pathological result that with endogenous choice between revenue per user and popularity of the search engine, and as the number of bidders increases, this competition becomes more and more desperate. We're all maxing out on how much we extract from the user because that's what we compete on, and the popularity just goes to zero. We end up less and less popular. Okay? So these are theoretical kind of ways to organize these thoughts. Let me show you what actually happened. So this empirical evidence comes from just their public disclosures where every quarter they published the results. I think this page is no longer active, but if you go on Wayback Machine, they're all there. And this data is from just 2020, from 4 batches of auctions, 4 quarters. As I said, each period there are 31 of them, 31 auctions, 1 per country. And they were importantly on a per install basis, right? So the one that I said is suboptimal. So here are the results. Now this table is hard to read, so don't despair. I'll explain to you how to interpret it. So first of all, each row is just one of those countries. Okay, and I sort those countries purely just by population, right? I could sort them by some others, but there's just from largest to smallest, just purely based on population. Okay, so that's easy. So population is the second column, and then at the bottom, I just have the sum of those. Now at the top, what I have at the top are names of search engines. Okay, that won at least one auction in at least one country during that period of time. Okay, so this is a full summary of that, and let me tell you how to read that. So, those are the search at info.com, PrivacyWall, DuckDuckGo, Bing, Yandex, Seznam, etc. So how do you read that? Well, let's, for example, read Germany, DuckDuckGo, and Bing. Okay, so what those 2 cells say is that DuckDuckGo won at least one slot, won one slot in the first and in the second auction. Remember I said I have 4, right? 4 quarters. So they won in the first quarter and in the second quarter. And then Bing won in the third and in the fourth. Okay? And so that's what each cell here represents. So like info.com won something in every single quarter. Okay. Now, and then the way I sorted the search engines, what I did, I just said, look, in each period, I can compute the average population they won, right? The average number of people that their search engine will be shown to, and take the average across 4 periods and sort them by that. So for example, info.com won a slot on every single auction, every single country. So the average population they won is the same as just the population of Europe, which is 520 million people. By contrast, Ecosia, which is this ecologically minded search engine, only won in periods 3 and 4 in Slovenia, which has a population of 2 million. So on average, they won 1 million people per period. Okay? All right, so that's the data. So now a question that most of you are probably having is, what the hell is info.com and PrivacyWall? Right? That's when I knew that something is wrong, right? These companies won the most. They won, like info.com won every single auction in every single country, every single period, and PrivacyWall did almost as well, right? By contrast, you have DuckDuckGo, which we all know, and it managed to win a little bit in the beginning, and then it gave up. Even Bing is winning a lot less than these two companies. And then I said, well, let me figure it out. So maybe it's just the European thing, right? Because, for example, there's this website Seznem, which I also hadn't heard of, but that's actually a real search engine. It's just a search engine that specializes in the Czech language, right? That's just that's what they specialize in, and so they did win in the Czech Republic and in Slovakia, which has the same language, for all of those periods. But info.com and Privacy Wall, and to a lesser extent this GMX thing, turned out to be basically some wrappers on Bing, where like with headquarters and some unclear, Caribbean islands with founders who are kind of sketchy, and then I said, well, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just not understanding that people actually like this thing. So the next thing I was able to do, it turns out that on Google Play Store. So this is an important thing an important detail that kind of made this possible. When you install one of those search engines, because of the way Android works, you have to automatically install an independent app for that search engine. So if you use Google, there is a Google app on your phone. So if you want to use Bing, there's going to be a Bing app installed on your Android phone. And so I can go to Play Store and just look at the total number of installs for those apps since the beginning of time. And that's going to be an upper bound on how many people installed it, right? Because clearly lots of people could have installed those apps independently, but it is an upper bound on how effective those choice screens were. So let's look at this info.com and Privacy Wall. So they were shown to 520 million people and 373 million people respectively for a year, right? So and for all of that, they were able to generate only on the order of 50,000 installs for one and 100,000 installs for the other, which is just nothing, right? If you think about the conversion, when I showed you this difference in conversion rate, I mean, this is just close to zero. And when you look at the number of people who reviewed them, it's even smaller. Like 63 people reviewed this info.com, even though 500 million were exposed to their ads for a year. And as you kind of study this, you see much more popular search engines, right? DuckDuckGo and Bing and Yandex. Well, Yandex may be a little bit more special because it specializes in just kind of some geographical areas. But DuckDuckGo, Bing, and Ecosia, they are very popular search engines, right? With 10 million installed, 5 million installed, even outside of this channel, and they won a lot less than these sort of totally random search engines but these random search engines were willing to pay per user because it's all per user. You're paying per install, not per appearance. Now, to talk a little bit about incentives, right? To whether you want to technological frontier and whether you want to skew the popularity and revenue one way or the other. I don't have direct evidence that companies changed anything, but I have two sort of desperate quotes, one from DuckDuckGo and one from Ecosia, sort of saying, please don't have us do that. So DuckDuckGo said, by the way, of all these apps here, DuckDuckGo was the most highly rated at 4.8. People really like DuckDuckGo. Ecosia is also very, very popular, right? It's not just the number of installs, it's also the rating on Play Store. So DuckDuckGo says, despite DuckDuckGo being robustly profitable, right? It's not a charity, it's a profitable organization since 2014. We have been priced out of this auction because we choose to not maximize our profits by exploiting our users, right? That's literally this trade-off I'm talking about. In practical terms, this means that our commitment to privacy and a cleaner search experience translates into less money per search, right? So that's exactly sort of this issue that I was highlighting. This means we must bid less relative to other profit-maximizing companies, right? This issue would not arise if you were ranking them by bid times popularity, because they would be very popular in return to all of these commitments. But in the current auction design, there is no way for this popularity of DuckDuckGo to shine through and help them in the auction. And then Ecosia has a similar sentiment. It was the second most highly rated search engine, more than 5 million installs. Ecosia is a not-for-profit search engine. Taking part in this auction would force us to spend our income on an unnecessary bidding war with other profit-oriented search engines. We would rather use these profits to plant trees on our endangered planet. I mean, that's literally what they do. If you go on their website, they take some fraction of revenue per search and use it to plant trees. All right, so after a lot of these things came to light, there was an official announcement from Google a year and a half after this was launched that said, following further feedback from the European Commission, we're now making some, I love the language, by the way, we're now making some final changes to the choice screen, including making participation free for eligible search providers. So basically, they scrapped the whole auction, and now they just rate search engines by their market share, kind of on like StatCounter or one of those, web visit counters. Okay, so conclusions. What do I take away from this, and what do I think this illustrates? First, as I already said, but I think it's worth reiterating, I actually think that Google and the European Commission deserve a lot of praise for trying new things, right? As I started out by saying, all we have for solving, there are lots of these interdependencies and platform product dependencies, that, all those major lawsuits flying around against most of these big companies, and essentially all we have are very heavy-handed tools, right? We have chainsaws to break them up, or just completely ban them from participating in some part of economic activity. Instead, they're trying this much more scalpel-like tool, and I think it actually, even though this particular one didn't work out, it gave way to the right way of thinking about this, and it could actually work really well. Right? Now, it's potentially applicable in lots of different settings. Now, I don't want to see a choice screen everywhere all the time, but if you think about your iPhone, and you think about how many apps there are provided by Apple, and whether it is illegal tying or not, or any other platform, there are lots of potential areas where this can be applied. But as I hope I convinced you, it needs to be fixed. Fortunately, the way to fix it, most people in this room who know quality scores know how to fix it. You need to compute quality scores correctly. You need to predict how many people will engage with your listing if you show it, and not just looking at the bids themselves and how much you value each click. And more importantly, and that I think echoes to what Elle was talking about, details, seemingly minor details, matter a great deal when you're designing marketplaces or auctions. It's these are, they're powerful systems, as Elle said, but they're also fairly delicate, and you need to make sure that they're designed correctly. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for showing us it's fascinating. It seems strange that Google as a company makes this kind of mistake, this kind of bidding mismatch between whether CPC versus CPM is what they do done since the beginning of plausible that they did it by design. To create a system that would seem really fair, highest bid per install wins, which means that the shittiest search engine, the one who squeezes the most out of the user, will end up winning. And Google will know that if they win, the shittiest is the highest. No one will pick them to Google. So they can satisfy the commission's desire for choice by offering the worst choice possible so that they still win. And this can be quite easily served, solved, if they just ask you to bid by impression instead.
So I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know, right? So I did work at Google 10 years ago, but that was long before this. I spent a year there. If it's hard to know, right? So I showed you the facts, and you can make your own judgment. But if that was their plan, then it backfired, right? Because at the end, they ended up giving this away for free to the most popular search engine. So whether it was an honest mistake or some, 7-dimensional chess, either way didn't work out, right? So it ended up being scrapped, and that part we can take for sure. Whether now. One thing I suspect, I don't know for sure, but it may be that it was a different group at Google who was designing it. That maybe it wasn't. Maybe they weren't thinking about this as ad auctions. Maybe it was some legal department or somewhere else. Who knows? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But what I do know is, if it was 7-dimensional chess, then it didn't work out for them. That I can say. But I have no basis to claim that that's what happened.
Do you mind standing up and be a little bit louder?
In trying to translate to our word predetermined, you can say that the end could be biting, and the popularity, we can say that would be a probability of CTR, that it would be something like this.
Yeah.
And revenue could be something about GMV or conversion. How do we translate it?
I think it's what the gentleman said. It's basically what you said. I think the closest analogy is bid as the revenue per user, and then popularity is the closest analogy is CTR. Yeah, and sort of, you need to estimate your CTRs and multiply by them and make sure you're doing the right job. All right?
I have a question.
You have a question. Uh-oh. Now I'm in trouble.
What is the caution? So it's a cautionary. What should any of us in this room take away as sort of lessons of this tale? Thank you, Mike. Yeah. Guys, that's all we have planned for today. So now we have happy hours, but our team called it Visionary Mixer. So I've heard this place has great food, good drinks. Enjoy it, yeah.